Quantum Research Labs, Bengaluru. For those who are joining today, ma'am has completed one lecture yesterday and talked about variational quantum algorithms and introduced quantum machine learning. She did her PhD from IIT Delhi on computer vision applications and deep learning. So without much time that I should take, I request Dr. Anupama Ray to take today's lecture. She is willing to share some of the use cases, especially for quantum machine learning, so that you can actually try some of those and then we take it forward. Over to you, Dr. Anupama.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Billy. Okay, so yesterday we did cover variational quantum classifier and variational quantum algorithm in general, like typically how VQAs worked. We did the mathematical proof and we saw that, okay, VQC is a linear classifier, and that was our intuition to get into today's, if that's a linear classifier, how can we build a stronger classifier? So that's what we'll do, but I thought I'll spend, say, the first 15 to 20 minutes today just to give you guys, because at the end I saw there was a lot of questions around, can we have a workflow tutorial, running code, real applications and so on. So I thought I can show you guys some of these optimization and QML applications that we have been building for real use cases, right? So for example, this is a work with Delta. So this is an optimization problem. So this is like gate scheduling, but you can think of this as a broader, just an optimization problem. Even if it is for gate scheduling, for aircraft, for LNG or ships, we did with ExxonMobil and so on. But the basic thing here is, think of a traveling salesman problem, right? It's a very hard problem, right? And these problems are actually in the class of NP hard, right? These are combinatorial optimization problem, difficult ones. Now, what we do is, here we are trying to do a quadratic assignment and solve these things using some of these algorithms. For example, one such optimization framework is Cubo, right? And we are using Cubo to solve this, right? Now, what is the way around for this? So classically, what people have been doing is, as soon as the nodes become larger and larger, it is a very difficult problem to scale classically, right? So now, can we actually scale using quantum to larger number of nodes is the potential thing that we have been trying to do here. Now this is not exactly an ML problem, it's a simulation problem, but I still wanted to spend some time here. This is a work that is very close to me, okay? So this is something that we were doing with Boeing, but the thing is, why is the problem so interesting? So you can think of corrosion as a concern to industry, right? But this is an aircraft manufacturing company, right? So at a very high altitude, high air pressure, wind pressure, storms. So there's humidity, water connection with water. So the surface of the material, that is the aircraft, that has corrosion and other problems, right? Now there is more story to it, right? And why I said that this is very close to my heart is, there's a very large problem here, which is something around hypersonic planes, right? So think of this, that okay, tomorrow if you want to build, and there is a lot of companies that want to build hypersonic planes, the problem is that you are thinking of now traveling at, say, 5 Mach, right? Now yeah, we have seen Tom Cruise movies of having like 10 Mach and so on, but yeah, I mean, realistically, that's all that is not possible. Even 5 Mach is something that we have not been able to achieve in the real world. And what it would need to achieve that, right? So if you have to build an aircraft that has to go at that speed, it has to go way above our current commercial aircrafts fly, and at that temperature, at that atmospheric pressure and all of those components, immediately the nose of the plane will start to melt, the body of the plane will start to melt if we are not able to do proper material discovery. So I just started to give you the use case, but trying to grab all your attention back to the problem, which is material discovery. And there is a big role of quantum simulations to play, or quantum algorithms in general to play. And because we yesterday studied this class of variational quantum algorithms, there is a variational quantum algorithm called variational quantum eigensolver, which helps us understand the eigenstate and the eigenvectors of, it could be ground state state or an eigenvector, and it could be for the excited levels as well. for actual materials. Now that is very important because we can understand material properties, we can think of combination of materials and even new material discovery, which is critical for all of these problems that I have been mentioning. There are several others, but exoplanet discovery is one thing, and so there's a lot of work that we have been doing with CERN, where we were using, they were actually using classical machine learning, and they are, of course, even with classical machine learning, because in CERN you can imagine, like, this is a large hadron collider, right? And there are these particles, so you're trying to identify particles, and these particles can be there, and there's a lot of vacuum, right? So it's you can treat it as some sort of your anomaly detection problem, where it's like one particle that you are trying to find in a space of, in a huge space, that one single particle, whether it got deflected or transmitted, or what is exactly happening with that single particle. And these are problems that are very challenging for classical machine learning, and there are some kind of things that we are trying to use quantum machine learning for such problems, right? So, I mean, I've put in more results, but what is rather more important are these papers, because you can go ahead and figure out what kind of exoplanet detection. I mean, the first one is, I think, Malik's paper, where they were looking at exoplanet detection, but then there are then there is more work which combines real and synthetic data. So because just to append more data, or to be able to figure out, it's very limited data when you actually think of these real data and you want to be able to do something. So training maybe on synthetic data and still being able to do that. So those are some kind of work that we have been doing. Again, another one, this is, again, asteroids. You can think of this as, so to be able to find the object's orbital characteristics, right? What is the semi-major axis, or what is the perihelion distance, or inclination, or eccentricity. So these could be different factors or features, right, which sort of govern the physical characteristics of these problems, right? Now, how can I model these things better? And here we were actually using something that we are going to learn today, which is QSVM, right? So we have done these experiments on both simulator and hardware, and I'll be so you can see the accuracy and the recall here, right? So these are results of QSVM algorithm, and they are comparable to classical algorithms. I'll not say that there is a huge gain that you have got. So this is, these are the algorithms that you see. So you see there's a lot of this VQC algorithms that we studied yesterday, and then there is also this QSVC algorithms that are there here in blue, right? So I mean, at least you see one of these QSVM algorithms, and say this one QSVC algorithm has been doing relatively very well, right? So there are some algorithms that are being able to do some. I mean there is a lot of setup and a lot of issues with these algorithms, and at what the verifiability is a concern still, right? So I mean, for some features, for some state, for some data, I'm being able to get a significant margin or a significant improvement over classical, but it is not consistent throughout everything, right? I cannot say that, okay, this particular algorithm is going to give you good results everywhere, right? It is sometimes data set bound, sometimes features bound, sometimes because of these parameters that you had in this model versus the change of parameters is not giving you similar results at all. Right. So of course there is accuracy advantages, and that's the reason people like CERN and others are using these algorithms. But these are all very dataset specific, so you cannot claim like a quantum advantage with quantum support vector machine. We are seeing advantage, but we are seeing pockets of advantages in very specific datasets. Again, this is like satellite image classification. This is one where we are trying to explore certain things. There's not a lot of work here, but yes, there's some experiments that people have done, and they're comparing it with some standard classical neural networks, which are currently the state of art. And then there is a hybrid model that has been proposed. Now, what you see here is that you have, I would not say this is an improvement. I mean, it's a very, very bleak improvement, but the advantage is that the number of parameters is significantly less. So you have say 40K versus 2 million, right? So 40,000 versus 2 million weight parameters, and much lesser number of epochs, you are being able to reach, say, as good as or slightly better accuracy than the standard CNN model. So in comparison to classical CNN, quantum CNN algorithms have definitely shown that okay, we can get probably exact same results with significantly lesser number of parameters. So that we have seen. But that alone is not sufficient to say quantum advantage, because even if it is significantly less number of parameters, it is using a quantum resource which probably is costlier than your classical resource. So you are still okay running this on a classical resource for maybe 2 days versus say 12 minutes on a quantum processing unit, because you don't have that or so. So there are a number of other parameters that has to work to your advantage, only then you can say. But again, this is also note that this is also very dataset specific, whatever accuracies improvements you are getting. And there is this work, so this is again another work with CERN where they are trying to model independent rare events. And here also there is the signal to background ratio of the training data set is low. So there is some classical autoencoders, and this is in comparison to classical autoencoder that the advantage point that we have got. So here one good thing that you can see is this is not just one single quantum algorithm. There is a bunch of quantum algorithms. For example, there's quantum k-means. Quantum k-means that was proposed. This is a clustering kind of algorithm proposed first by Discarinides. And then, of course, you had kernel theory, which we are going to study today. And in combination of both, we see some sort of advantages. Again, very dataset specific advantages, but we do see that advantage, right? But one clear thing that you see is, okay, it has been able to do background rejection better than the classical model. Right. So if you just do the true positive, that the 4 grid, then you see that okay, background rejection is very, very good for the quantum model versus the classical model. Even at an all over on the entire classification problem, maybe there is a slight improvement, but at background classification it's major. So when you combine both of these algorithms together, then you see that okay, for background rejection the numbers are distinctively high. So for example, 38 in comparison to 7, or 27 in comparison to 11. So this is the reason, or these are the promises or the reasons why people are working on it. Now, one thing that I want you to be very sure is that the latent dimension is small. So the problems that we see at say at these dimensions, at smaller depth circuits, yes, you see that advantage. But the moment you start to load, say, more data, because loading more data takes increases the number of gates that your encoder should have. And as soon as your encoder becomes deeper and deeper because of noise, one major problem is that it could go to exponential if you are thinking about millions of data like the deep learning algorithms, right? So then it will become exponential, and then the potential quantum advantage that you were supposed to get, that is lost, because in the very first stage you had a very deep network, right? So those are some concerns. But if you see that on this scale of problems, yes, there is a distinctive advantage, at least what they are getting. Now, just switching gears to a different application. So I've been working on healthcare life science for quite some time, and there are multiple problems that typically, quantum can help in here. Or what we often say, internally is that, quantum is probably going to help these areas of material discovery. So primarily quantum chemistry, high energy particle physics, and quantum biology. Right? These 3 areas we know for sure we are going to see the earliest, the big quantum advantage kind of work, right? So there are other quantum advantages I showed you with numbers, right? So there is some amount of advantage, some amount of improvement. Let's not call it advantage at this point. Some amount of improvements that you see these models doing on classical data problems, like the CQ quadrant that we were talking about. But these are problems where we really have a scope of that huge impact. Right? So, for example, in network biology, where you're looking at modeling, cellular networks, a lot of work in multiomics. We have a paper on, multiomics data where, we were just brainstorming. We tried to form this technical working group, and we did it for very long. And it took us more than a year to identify that, okay, yes, these are, say, 4 strong threads wherein we see that, okay, quantum is helping in these ways, right? So, and of course, omics data is going to come big time. So yes, of course, I will share the research papers. So there is a lot of work in, say, in gene theory, genome annotation, and I mean in general, can we so use, say, genetics data along with, say, image data. So all this while, if you think of healthcare life sciences, they have been relying on, say, for example, for cancer therapy, right? A lot of you might have worked on, say, a very common data set on Kaggle, and for a lot of hackathons and competitions, it's breast cancer detection, right? Because you have a lot of these mammogram images, right? And from that images, can you exactly do, say, image segmentation problem, image identification problem, and so on. So many problems and so many things have been worked out, right? But what we strongly know, and what clinicians keep telling us, is there is one a critical component that we are missing if we only study or only analyze someone from the images. If you had the data of their gene profile, then you can potentially tell someone even way before that they are likely to have, say, cancer. You can actually tell them that this is the type of cancer that you can potentially have, and you can actually think of, treatment plans beforehand, right? So you can actually try to avoid that, or help them that, okay, they should periodically get themselves screened, so that they are, early diagnostics is a possibility for them. And this is not just true for one type of cancers. This is actually true for, say, several, maybe all types of cancer, or maybe several types of cancers, that your genetics already has this information, and the changes that your genes go through, from that people can actually give you an understanding that potentially you can have so and so cancer. So if we could do that kind of thing, and these are the reason why we cannot do this, are these are large computations, okay? So just in order to, respect time, we'll be quicker on this. So there's a lot of work in prediction, or treatment iteration. So if a person is taking these kind of medications, and if they persistently take for this time, the sort of disease can be cured, or what is the pathway, what is the drug pathway, right? So these kind of things we have been doing with Cleveland Clinic, and where we have actually some results showing that, some of these QML algorithms actually are way better than the classical ML algorithms. In precision medicine, so there is one such work that I know, which is CAR T cell therapy done. This is the work done by some of my colleagues. This is the work that I was referring to when I said that, when you use classical CNNs versus you use quantum CNNs, the quantum CNNs are able to give you the results that classical CNNs are giving with, significantly less number. Significantly lesser number of model parameters, right? So if we are talking about model parameters in the range of hundreds, and in classical and CNNs, we are talking in the range of billions, right? Then, of course, there's a lot of things in early diagnostic, in clinical trials, fraud detection in general, and so on. So this is a work with Moderna, and so mRNA, as you guys know, if some of you have worked on mRNA, so mRNA structures are very notorious, and there's a lot of research that has been happening. So, but why quantum here? So quantum optimization methods, can in principle predict mRNA secondary structures more accurately and efficiently than what you see in the state-of-art classical approximation, right? So Moderna partnered with us, and we did a lot of work in predicting mRNA secondary structures at a greater scale. This work aims to unveil, say, more diverse mRNA therapies and novel therapies. And as you know, in fact, for COVID, this became very clear, and that became that it is an important direction. So here we use the Eagle processor, so IBM Eagle processor, as well as IBM Heron processor. And in these experiments, we were looking at mRNA structures with a sequence length of 42 nucleotides, which is roughly, you can say that in the range of 10 to 80 qubits. is what we experimented around. And say we also extended some of these simulations which is not there in this chart. So this one I think is a 80 qubit, I mean this is mapped into an 80 qubit mRNA sequence, but we also have like 48 nucleotide mRNAs which require around 150 qubits. So that kind of simulation studies have also been done. Now, what is the significance of this result? So running these conditional value at risk, so that's the name of the algorithm. That's a variational quantum algorithm. It's called CVAR VQA. Now, when we ran this on hardware with only very basic error mitigation, right, we could see accurate insights of the folding mechanisms, right? So on the energy states, on the folding mechanism, whatever we were getting, and this is with very basic error mitigation, it is actually close to what you get on your classical processor. So classically, you say you use Cplex, and so we wanted to compare with the classical state of art. So we compared with Cplex versus our experiments, our hardware results, and we saw that okay, with very basic error mitigation, we can match that. Now you could have possibly a better, say, a probabilistic error amplification or probabilistic error cancellation, which is the strongest error mitigation algorithm out there, and maybe that ways you could do a way better job. But already this is like a 150 qubit kind of experiment, so this is like a very hard experiment. But what we are proving here is that optimization schemes like CVAR VQA can produce these reliable outputs on utility scale. So this is like 80 to 150 qubits. This is definitely utility scale. These are relatively very large problem instances because we are working on these huge, I mean, mRNA structures. So there is a path to business value that is clear here, right? And of course, the paper link is here, and there's a demo also that is available from the team. Now another work, this is the Cleveland, this is again a work with Cleveland, but it's on predicting protein structures. So there's a lot of work, and as I said, the predicting protein structures can also be done by these variational quantum algorithms. So we have been using algorithms like VQE, variational quantum eigensolver, for these problems. Recently we have moved from these class of variational algorithms to a class of sampling based diagonalization algorithms. So now we are actually applying SQD or SQD type of algorithms for these kind of problems, right? This is a quantum kernels work. So this is again a quantum SVM on the problems that this problem I think I discussed yesterday, where we were talking about okay, on electronic health record data, if I am wanting to say there is a drug adherence or there is a drug persistence and so on, can I actually figure out from my training whether this person will have what is the impact of this drug on this person, right? So we partnered with Amgen on this. This is an old work, and I think I showed the paper IEEE transaction of quantum engineering, the work that we had. And yes, we worked on say 5 to 20 features and 200 to 300 training samples, and a different configuration. We did different experiments and showed all these numbers. So all these numbers that you see are for different configurations numbers. Now, this is again the CAR T cell work, but this is not just the CAR T cell work. There's a lot of work in precision medicine in general, where there's possibly a lot of use cases for quantum machine learning. And one such problem that we applied on Singapore, because Singapore has a very good population, and their government realized that they have a very good mix of Asians and Europeans, and I mean it's a small population, but the distribution is in such a way that you can take that distribution and think of a very similar distribution, which is the population distribution of the world. So if they can come up with some precision medicine, so what is precision medicine? You're trying to say that the targeted drug, so drug for this ethnicity, for the same disease, for this ethnicity, will probably not be able to cure that person, versus for some other ethnicity and the same disease and the same drug can probably cure you better, right? So we know that okay, I'm just making up ethnicity as one of the parameters, but there are so many such parameters, and we know that okay, personalized medication works, right? But yes, I mean, more studies is needed to do it at that level. But yes, this is something that has been proven. Now, again, predicting heart failure. So there's some amount of work, and you can see here that okay, the maybe the processing time is faster, but in terms of algorithms, there's a very slight improvement in comparison to the classical algorithms, right? So health insurance and clinical trial site and other problems, I'll not spend too much time on that, because we have to come back to our algorithms. But I mean, one of the thing here is, healthcare fraud is has been, we have seen a lot of this kind of things happening by medical providers, patients, and even others. This is like an intentionally you want to deceive the healthcare system to get some benefits in terms of payments generally. So these are again problems which are typically in the scale of this in the scale of, one second, let's see, oh, battery. Okay. In the scale of anomaly detection problems and those kind of problems, we have seen yesterday an example that why classical machine learning algorithms don't work very well there, because of the huge class imbalance, and where can quantum machine learning help. So clinical trial site virtual screening in drug discovery and so on, these are all problems where we have been trying to apply and compare the QML algorithms with the current ML algorithms, and these are all problems that we have been considering, right? So again, here you see some QML or some quantum advantages that you see. I'll again tell you that okay, we have got these things, we have been running them through multiple hardwares at different times of the day, just to be very careful that it's not a one time result that you get, but you can repeat it and verify it and get it multiple times. So that while that is true, and experimentally we have proven it, that over a period of 3-4 months we keep running it across different times, different hardware, so different noise profiles, and still we are getting better results. But it's on some particular data set. It does not mean that it is going to run across all types of data set. So yeah, maybe okay, maybe I'll just spend, say, because we started 5-6 minutes late, so maybe I'll just spend few more minutes in here, and then I'll go back. If you see, this is again the third industry sector that I picked up. So this is automotive industry, and again in automotive industry there were a lot of these problems that people are using, say, quantum simulations or quantum optimization or quantum machine learning. For example, battery design. So it is more of a material discovery kind of a process. You want to be able to come up with a new battery material which can run longer, which could be lightweight, which doesn't have suffer from corrosion, and you don't need to periodically charge, and all of those constraints, all of those features in a battery that you typically want. But so basically you want to enhance the battery performance, but you don't want to have a major overhead. So there is a lot of quantum simulation work there. There's a lot of work in quantum design optimization, quality control. Quality control is a place where we are using a lot of this QML work for reducing cost of scrap rework, reducing production cost, identifying early defects, doing production optimization and predictive maintenance. So yeah, I'll not go through all of this. So yes, higher manufacturing uptime. So we have actually seen some of this work here also. So this is basically on the production line. There is an uptime of the production line, and it is a very important metric for the manufacturing industry in general. So if the production line is interrupted, there is cost and they continue to accrue. So the product, till the product is produced, the cost keeps increasing. So that is something that we cannot ideally have. And we have done some work here using QML algorithms where we have got some higher accuracy. Note, these are not very large data sets that we have achieved this, but yes, say FDC detection, which suffers from high false positive rates, here we have actually got a significant improvement using QML algorithms. Again, predictive maintenance or factor scheduling optimization, and several others, right? So there are several such use cases that you will see, people are looking at when we talk about quantum machine learning in general. Okay. If there are any questions, I can take up a few questions, and then maybe we'll switch back to my other screen. Okay. For drug discovery, yes. So basically, in the area of drug discovery, there are a large number of problems. For example, there is a drug pathway problem, which you can say, which we this. So there's a classical algorithm called optimal transport. Okay, it's not. So it's machine learning, but I would say it's more of linear algebra than machine learning. So optimal transport we have been using typically to understand what is the drug life cycle. So when a drug enters the body, how does it react with the cellular microenvironment, and leading to, say, the cell death or cell recovery, right? So now that something like that we have been trying to understand, and there is a new algorithm that has been also proposed, which is called quantum conditional optimal transport. And in that case we saw a huge margin, I would say, of improvement over classical optimal transport, right? So that is one place where I saw it's not exactly I mean broadly comes under the area of drug discovery, but in drug discovery there is a lot of things. For example, you want to be able to come up with new proteins that bind to, say, the virus or the bacteria or whatever is the cause of the infection. So you want to figure out what is the best drug for that. Now, in order to figure out what is that material, there is a lot of, yeah, I'm not sharing slides. I'll just be sharing my iPad screen and start writing, but I'm just taking up a couple of questions. So in that area, what happens is typically quantum simulation algorithms are most useful, because you are wanting to now simulate, say, a large number of, so things like this mRNA problem, or things like material discovery. So there's a lot of work that can be done. So drug discovery data set. So I mean, within drug discovery, what exactly you want to do along that lines, you can find data sets. You can actually get so TCG. I can give you some maybe some links, and you can go ahead and find out if something is more relevant. Okay, yeah, multi-omics data. Yes, there is very few multi-omics data, today, but going forward, we know, right, multi-omics is going to be the next big thing. So instead of only say only images, can we have omics data, and can we have more fine-grained understanding of omics data is something which people are looking at. Okay, there is, could you recommend references, research papers, review articles? One second. So predicting and mitigating lightning strikes. Okay. I don't know of exact lightning strike prediction, but there are a lot of work in the energy and utility sectors. There might be something. So I am not on top of this particular application of lightning strike prediction. How can we decide that that we have quantum advantages? Okay, so if you are you have to do a lot of classical benchmarking to understand what is the best classical state of art on this problem. And once you have that, then the next thing that we do is we see how better you are from the classical state of art. Are there things that you can do better with the classical algorithm? So see, you don't want to end up in a situation which we are today. We are in the reason why we say call this utility scale is we are being able to do some very useful quantum computing today, where we are showing results either at par with classical or sometimes slightly better than classical. But I'll tell you as a fact is the moment you come up with a paper and you publish a paper in this area, typically in QML field, this is something very commonly happening. So you publish something, you get a 7%, 8%, 10%, whatever percent improvement over the best state of art classical model. Then, within a month's time, there will be someone who is going to work on the classical side of things and, improve the classical algorithm a bit more. And, that 7, 8, 10%, is something that people can beat. Okay, so that is something that has been, that is something that we have always seen, right? So typically what we want is, that's why we are not calling it quantum advantage alone by saying that okay, it's 7%, 8% improvement. If I could come up with a proof that it is always going to be this much improvement and there is a way to verify that, then probably we could have claimed quantum advantage on it already. For image processing, how can we use quantum entanglement and superposition? For data loading itself, we'll use superposition. So that's a clear thing. For correlations, understanding data correlations, we typically use entanglement, right? And this is true for both image data or for your say time series data or any other data. Now in image processing, generally we have not seen any major quantum breakthrough or quantum advantage. The reason is there are these very large images. For example, when we were working with these satellite images, right? So these are these very, very large images. And imagine that if you want to have pixel by pixel information and load them into your quantum circuits, you are saying that I am wanting to load a very large, massive size image and massive information into my qubits. Now, while they are equipped to do theoretically, what happens, the real engineering challenges come in. So you have to have a lot of gates in order to be able to encode this large data I mean effectively or properly into your quantum circuit. Now as soon as you start, it could be, it could be as big as exponential number of gates that you want to be able to have a very good representation of your data. Now if you have exponential number of gates, think of the noise level that you will end up. So it will be meaningless information at the end of the encoder, right? So because of noise and because of several other things, several other engineering challenges that we have today, it is not straightforward to get a huge benefit on image data versus say other types of data.
Uh, Thank you, ma'am. I request the participants, please understand that this is not specifically a research-oriented the faculty development program. So we are introducing you the concepts. Now it is up to you to apply. So I'll request, ma'am, you can take it forward. I think we can move back. Maybe the last question you can answer, and then we can take it forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, HSPC maybe I will come back to it because it's a particular application and as per time evaluation factor quantum process producing different results, how to justify correct results we obtain over a period of time. So over a period of time, the results, if they are varying, then they are potentially due to the noise in the hardware that changes over time, right? Noise is a function that changes over time. So that could be one of the reasons why you have a change in the results. The way we do is we run so many jobs and we run each job at a very high number of shots to be able to average out the results, and generally you will see if you run for a large number of shots even at different noise profiles, your results will stay true. And that's what happened in the case of HSPC also. So even at different noise profiles and at different hardwares, you still should get that potential gain if you have run your experiments, your multiple circuits at a very large number of shots. Okay, so now I think, we started 10 minutes late, so I think I'm still okay, but yeah, now we can to start. It's my screen. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so yesterday we discussed about VQC, and we ended the class with the proof that VQC is a linear classifier. And we said that, okay, if VQC is a linear classifier, then how can we come up with a stronger classifier? So today we are going to start with something called quantum kernels. and we are going to see, okay, how does kernel theory come into place, and so on. So what is the motivation here? So motivation was VQC is a linear method in a quantum feature space. So the reason why we still get advantages here is that because the quantum feature space is a very large high dimensional Hilbert space, so you have been able to potentially discern maybe the data better. So even in that case, if a linear method is there, the linear method performs significantly good. But we know that, okay, it will still be a very big limitation. So can we use some methods which are not linear or non-linear? So can we use quantum kernels as similarity metrics? So that's what we are going to learn today. And what is the necessary condition for quantum advantage? So the kernel has to be hard to compute classically. So there's a condition here. So there's a necessary condition for quantum advantage to, only in this case you will potentially get an advantage. This is necessary, but I should actually write that this is not sufficient for computational advantage. Okay, that the kernel should be hard to compute classically. Now, if you compute, say, a RBF kind of a kernel, then yeah, of course, classically you can do RBF. So then you will not get any advantage doing the quantum. Right? So today we are introducing this method called quantum enhanced kernel methods. We are going to look at the space of different things here. So because we are talking about kernel, what is a kernel? So basically a kernel is a similarity metric, you can say, right? So it's a similarity metric, let's say, of two data points. Okay. Now, kernel theory is an abstract math theory. It's very similar to the quantum theory. And you can actually look at a paper. So maybe I should give some references here. So I think I discussed this paper by Seth Lloyd. I forgot the year, but it is called SVM can be quantized and run as a quantum algorithm. What is a quantization? So quantization is basically a heuristic procedure. So given a classical system, it could be a Lagrangian or a Hamiltonian theory of particles, you want to be able to produce a quantum theory. So you want to be able to produce a Hilbert space or a Hamiltonian operator, or more generally some time evolution kind of a property, right? So you have a symmetric group of space-time and you want to be able to with some process, you can actually convert a classical system to a quantum system, right? Now, let's say I have, say a number of data points, right? So let's say I have m data point. Let's say I have m data points, okay? So I can say x1, x2, xm. Or maybe I should have written x1 to xm, right? Now, for simplicity, we are making it 1D data. You can think of this as 2D data or whatever for images or higher dimensional data. But let's say we have a 1D data that we are working with. Now, we can anchor each of this data point by a kernel kappa, which will take, say, the first input x1 and say a second data, which could be any other point. And you're saying that what is the similarity of a random point with this point. So if this point, the other point lies directly on this, so then it would be very high. But as it goes away, it will decrease, right? So you can see these are things like Gaussian. So you can potentially have so many Gaussians, right? So many small, big, whatever it is, you can have Gaussian. So basically what you are saying is if the other point that x, say an x tilde or something like that, say that is lying exactly on each of these points, then you have a peak, and otherwise the it just slowly dies down, right? So this we can call as some kernel kappa, and as it is decaying, you can say that okay, every point is anchored by one of these kernels, right? Now if you want to estimate the probability density function, so we say it as a kernel density estimator. So what are we trying to do here? We are saying that okay, you add all these Gaussians here, and then you can potentially create a kernel density function, right? So this is a probability density function by adding all Gaussians. Right? Now this is your kernel. So this is your capital K. Let's say it is x1, x, right? X being your new data point, right? And this could be anything like xm to kernel of xm to x, right? So this is basically your kernel, or you call it kappa. I mean whatever it is, k or kappa. Right? So basically you're adding all these Gaussians. What is increasing is your width, right? So the width of this larger probability distribution, that is increasing. But of course, if you change the kernel function, the density distribution function will also change, not just in the width, but also in the height and, in terms of the similarity metric. So this idea, here that we have, we can actually use this idea as a classifier. Okay, so let me try to draw this into say two colors to be more clear. So maybe red. So let's say you have class 0, which is these red dots, right? And again here, we could have done these small kappas. So we can actually create a one big, say, probability distribution here. And then let's say you have another class, which is class 1. And let's say you have, again, you might have probability distribution, right? So then if you have, say, a new guy here, which is your new input. The problem here is you're trying to say that, okay, I want green color not visible clearly. Okay. Okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Okay, so maybe I will use black. So this is a new data point. Okay, so this is a new data point, and whenever I have a new data point, my thing is that I want to be able to figure out whether this new data point belongs to class 0 or class 1, right? So I will just assign it. So I can project it and say this is one projection and this is one projection. Whichever it belongs, wherever the density is higher, we'll put it to that particular class. How am I doing it? So on the image, it is relatively easier to understand that, okay, it is closer towards this or closer towards this wherever I have a higher density. But typically what we do is we multiply it with the class label, right? So think of this. So how do we write it? This is the kernel. So let's say kernel x of m and x of this new data point is the tilde. I multiply that with the label. So this is the kernel, right? And I'm saying that I multiplied it with the label. So multiply with the label. So label of the class. So you multiply this with this much into class 0 and this much into class 1. So you actually do this kind of a multiplication here. And then you do it because you have to sum over all these data points, right? Because you're doing it across these two larger probability density function. So then you actually put a sum here. So sum over all of these data points, right? So now this is your actual way that you are figuring out which class it belongs to. Now if I make it a classification problem, then you want to have something like a threshold function. So this threshold function, I should write it here that this is a threshold function. that will just put it to say some real number, say it could be +1 -1 or 0 and 1 or whatever it is, right? So basically this threshold function maps it to a real number, right? So basically, to be able to find your y tilde or the label of y, which is so x, this new input, let's call it x tilde. The question was, what is the class of x tilde, or which is y tilde is equal to what? This was your question, and here this is how you answered what is your y tilde. So what I'm trying to give you guys is the geometric interpretation, and from that we are coming to the math, right? From the math to geometric, so geometric interpretation is easier, so that's why I started from there, and from there the math becomes very, very easy, right? Now we did a geometric interpretation, we got the math. Now let us actually try to see how we can formalize it. So if we say a kernelized classifier, I mean, we can see by means of an example. So this function, right? So this we can call as gx, let's say. Okay. So I'll then say take up 4 data points. So let's say you have a data set where you have 4 data points, and if you have 4 data points, then effectively, so x1, x2, x3 and x4. So you see that this is m1 to m, so in this case it would be m1 to 4. So you can just break this line, right? So this, let's say this is equation 1. So now let's expand equation 1. So I will say expanding 1, you get that g of x is and you want to put some class label. So let's say first one was -1. So -1 of kernel of the first data point with x. Again, let's say the next one was also -1, the kernel of x and second data point and x. Then let's say we have +1 of third point and x, and +1 of fourth point and x. Okay, so there are 2 data points on both classes, right? So I'm just trying to make it as a balanced class balanced problem here, right? Now in this case, what then, let's say what is my kernel? So I will have to compute some similarity measures. So similarity measures could be different things. It could be distance, it could be distance between 2 vectors. For example, in these in NLP kind of domain, where you take these word vectors, right, or whatever, the LLMs also use the same kind of theory. You take word vectors, and then it has some higher dimension. You are just trying to do matching of word vectors. So those are all similarity metrics. So let's say I just put in, say, x1 of x is some arbitrary numbers. So x2 of x is, let's say, 2, and x3 of x is, say, 0.1, and x4 of x is, say, again, right? So given this, I can just rewrite g of x as -1 of 5, -1 of 2, and plus 0.1 and plus 0.1, right? So basically this is 5 2, this is -7 plus 0.2, this is -6.8, right? Now here you see this. So this sign is indicating your class, right? So clearly the sign decides the class of the data point, right? So this particular data point belongs to class -1, right? So this is effectively shown, right? So this is exactly what we have tried to do. Say either if you geometrically do, then you find out, okay, this portion of this large and this portion of this large, then where does it belong to, or you can mathematically compute that, or you can experimentally figure that out, right? So different ways to construct and say that, okay, why do kernels work as classifiers? This is like one approach, right? But this is exactly what we are using as the basis of our SVM. right? So 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 if you guys remember classical SVM, you had this Lagrangian formulation and the dual and the primal forms, right? So you had these kernels as inner product, right? So same way, if we just write, remember this particular equation, right? So everything we are going to derive from this particular equation itself. And what we are saying here is, let's just rewrite that, say y of this is sum over m is equal to 1 to m. And you have now different parameters, right? So you have this label, right? This is your class label. And you have some kappa k or some kernel. And now I am giving it a different notation, right? So this notation, why am I using this notation here, is this part here is your inner product, right? Now I am actually telling you that this kernel could be an inner product. Now we'll actually see, okay, why it can be an inner product, what is the conditions it has to maintain if it has to be an inner product and still be a valid kernel and all of that, right? So I'm first saying that, okay, this is the inner product of these two data points. And the Lagrangian of the model, that also we can write. So let's say the Lagrangian, we can indicate it with lag L of gamma. And this we can write as, again, it's the sum over all these data points. We can just pull this outside, okay, cross m minus the in the primal form. So again, this is a big sum over that we'll do, and it should be on both parameters now, m and let's say m dashed, right? Again, you will have your two classes, so you will have your y of m and y of m dashed, right? And the same kernel will follow, right? It's just that the notation is slightly changing, right? So instead of the round braces here, I am now saying, here I said that this is a kernel which is some similarity metric. And here I am saying that this is a inner product. That's it. No other difference, right? So basically what we are saying is we can replace the inner product with a kernel function. And that is what is called the kernel trick. I'm going to prove all of this and show, but the classical proofs you all know. I'm going to prove just the quantum part. But I mean, kernel trick is basically what you have from classical as well. What is the kernel trick? Where you're saying that, okay, now you have replaced inner product with a kernel function, right? Now, just to complete the math part of it, what is a kernel definition by math? So in when we started, we said that kernel is nothing but some sort of a similarity metric. So now we'll try to formally define it. So kernel definition is basically, let's say, a large X I create, and this is a non-empty set. So you can call this as your input set, and you have some function k for which you know that, okay, their inner products exist, and it is some gram matrix. So you say that this is a kernel. This is a kernel if the gram matrix K, which has the entries, so with entries K M dashed is equal to K x of M and x of M dashed is positive semi-definite. So this is a condition, and we are going to understand why the condition and what it means by the condition. But this can be a valid kernel only if there exists some gram matrix which has these complex entries. And what are these complex entries? These complex entries look like this. What are these? These are pairwise similarity of data points. And this has to be positive semi-definite. So what do you mean by positive semi-definite? So just to correct, green is not working. So what does positive semi-definite mean? So if say your inputs are, let's say, x1, x2, xm, and this belongs to some thing, and this is selected, right? And an arbitrary complex numbers you have C1, again, let's say use the same notation C1 to Cm. Then a particular equality, so this equality has to hold. I will write that equality and we are going to prove that equality also eventually. But what do you mean by that? First I'll give that intuition and then we'll come back to the math. So you will have some constants, okay? We'll come to what it is. You will have your kernel function. And we're saying that has to be positive semi-definite, right? So this has to be positive semi-definite. So why am I iterating on this so much, right? And what am I trying to lead you guys to? So, oops. Yeah. So from kernel theory, we have this concept that kernels, I mean, we are trying to changeably use this, right? And we're trying to say that kernel and this inner products, right? We are interchangeably using it. Now, why are we doing that? Because there is a quantum mechanics and kernel theory bridge that I'm trying to show you guys. And I'll probably give you guys a geometric understanding first, and then we'll get back to the math part. So let's say I have an input space. Just try to, so you, as we said, right, x is your input set. It will have different data points, say x1 to x m, right? Let's say this is like a cloud bubble, okay? And you have a feature space, right? Which is, so you take this to some higher dimension. So this is, say, phi of x1. And again, same way you do a modulation of this one also. This is phi of x. You did this with using some function here. So this is your that particular function. Let's call this as your feature space, right? So you guys have studied in classical SVM that, okay, we are saying that it takes to a very high dimension, right? So think of this as taking to some higher dimension by means of some conversion that you are doing, right? Forget what conversion, whatever it is. You can think of some transformation that you are applying. If it is linear transformation, doesn't really add much value. If it is, say, exponential and at least logarithmic exponential, so some higher dimensional that you are trying to move it to. Now what we are saying here is our kernel guy K of, say, x comma x1 is basically inner product of this feature space, right? So you can understand this in two ways, okay, or two interpretations. So you have a feature map that is mapping these. So you know this feature map F. that feature map can map your input space or inputs from this input distribution to this feature space, and then take inner products, compute these inner products or inner products between them, right? And that would be your kernel. Or there is a second way of understanding this, wherein you say that I know of a kernel, exists a kernel, and kernel theory guarantees us that there are these kernel theory methods that guarantee you that there will always be a feature map. If you know the kernel, then there will always be a feature map such that, in the feature space, this holds. Okay, so maybe this is important to write this. So, two interpretations. We'll go slow on this because I want you guys to understand the concept. The math proof is just 2-3 lines, so we'll anyways prove that. So the first interpretation is I have a feature map. So F feature map is known, right? So if F feature map is known, this F maps your inputs to feature space and takes inner products of these feature vectors and gets this kernel matrix on feature space, right? So this everyone with me here. So F is known, so you know there is some way, some function that you can apply. So if you do f of x, so f of x is phi of x. So f of x is phi of f, f of x is phi of x, right? So you know that there is some function f that you apply, and you can transform your data. Right? You can transform your data to some higher dimensional space. And if you know this particular function, that okay, it might be something like, okay, whatever you get, you make that e of x. That's your function, right? So if you can do that, you know how to compute inner products, and if you can compute inner products, that will form your kernel. Or, very important is or. The second way to understand, or second way of interpretation, is I have a kernel, right? Our K, right? And I am guaranteed by kernel theory methods that there will be a feature map such that there is a feature space that, such that, so basically so now you're going on the other side. So you're saying that I know a kernel, so I know that there will be this, and then I know that there will be a feature space where this equality holds. There is a feature space where, let's say this is A, so equality A holds. Okay. What is a feature space? Feature space is an Hilbert space. So we are talking about generalization of this large real space. Okay. So always remember that here your feature space is a Hilbert space. Okay. Hilbert space is an abstract space that has inner products. So you can call it a generalization of real numbers. Right. Now let's come back to our math. So this was just to give you guys the intuition. Now we are back to the math that we said this has to be positive semi-definite, and we were like really strict on this part, right? So now if we want to prove that theorem, so we say that, okay, given say our inputs x1 to xm, and all of them belong to some space, and I had complex numbers which were c1, to CM. Again, they belong to some space. I wanted to show, so the problem statement, let's just rewrite the problem statement. The problem statement was, if I sum it across all the data points, CM star into K of XM will always be greater than equal to 0. Only then my kernel is positive semi-definite, then only it is a valid kernel. If this inequality doesn't hold, then it is not a valid kernel, right? So let's consider a kernel which is the inner product of two feature vectors, and we need to show that, okay, this thing holds, right? So what will we do? We can say that, okay, there is, let's say, so by virtue of similarity of inner products, so now you realize why I made them inner products in the first place. So we had the so you had different implementations, right? So earlier we had written it as a similarity function, which was just any similarity function. Then we changed it into inner products. This is the reason why we changed it here as inner product, so that we could use this in order to prove a lot of our math and make things possible, right? So we know that, okay, similarity of inner products, we can pull these coefficients out and we can just rewrite this part. So let's rewrite this part. So you forget the sum over part right now. It will have these terms, and each of these terms you can just put in the sum inside. So let's say for the CM part, you have this part and then K of XM. So basically you can just rewrite this as phi of XM. I just rewrite this like this, right? And then you will have another term which would be your M dashed, which will be your C of M dashed and phi of XM dashed, right? So basically you are saying that you have inner products of these things, right? Now you see that this is like a squared norm. So this basically you can say this is CM and 5 X of M. This is basically a squared norm, right? And squared norm always is positive. So square is always positive, right? Square is always positive, so it's always greater than equal to 0. So then this part is greater than equal to 0, right? So effectively you have proved this, that this is always greater than equal to 0. So what are you proving here? So you are proving, hence proved that inner product of two feature vectors is also positive semi-definite. Why is this important? If it is so, only then it is a valid kernel, right? So you see the way I'm going back. So first I said that if this has to be if it is a kernel, if this gram matrix has these kind of entries, and if these entries are positive semi-definite. I went back and again I proved it all the way, that yes, it will always be semi-definite, that the kernel inner products of two feature vectors is always semi-definite. And what did we say? Inner product of two feature vectors is our kernel. So then we can say, so kernel we started with similarity matrix. So now we are saying inner products of these two feature vectors is a similarity metric, and it's a valid similarity metric. It's a valid kernel, and we can now use it for our for classification and any other task. So you can now expand this feature space to as high as a dimension that you can go, right? And with this use of this kind of kernels, it is making things very impactful. So you guys would have seen a lot of these examples, right, where you have and typically the XOR kind of problems, right? So here you say that, okay, now I will actually make it in the form of a cube. right? And now I say that, okay, this data point is lying here, this data point is lying here, and now you can draw planes in between and you can make these data points separable easily, right? So you are now converting your data to some higher dimension. So this is what you mean when you say converting it into higher dimensions or using these kind of kernels, right? So this is a major reason why quantum feature maps work, right? Now, this is what you have in the kernel trick, and again in that same Lagrangian formula that we had previously, we are going to just put it back to that class. So we'll start with classical SVM max margin, and if we know the equation of that max margin, so we have it. So if we just put back this particular kernel trick into the Lagrangian that we wrote before, so you can just sum it over, say I alpha i's, and you have the same terms. I will just have minor modifications here. So you will have the class label, say yi yj. So and you will have, say, the alpha I alpha j, which is your Lagrangian multipliers. And now you have your kernel. So you have, right? So this I should write this portion also. So this is your k of ij, or your inner products of the data vectors and the labels. So here your trick saying that okay, it has already been transformed to say some higher dimension, and then you're taking an inner product of them, right? So all we need to know here is this guy k, right? So kernel function implicitly encodes our feature map, and that's what is your kernel trick. So you have a matrix with these entries or these distances that is independent of the dimensions of xi and xj, right? So you see that here it doesn't matter that what is the dimension of xi and xj, you can still create and encode this kernel, right? So as long as I know how to compute this guy, right, I can, oops, sorry. So as long as I know how to compute this guy, so let's say you have a feature, you have this as a distance between two data points in, the screen is not visible. Yeah, wait 1 second. I just suddenly got quit. It's back. Hold on, please. Oops. Okay, I think it's hanging a bit. One second, just hold on. I think it's hanging a bit. I'm just trying to scroll. It's not letting me. It's scrolling, but okay, slowly. Okay, so the way we were writing this, we were trying to say that okay, as long as I know how to compute my phi of xi transpose into phi of xj, then I don't care about the dimension of it, right? Even if it is very large feature space, like I teleported it to a very large dimension, right? And is that doing that in a very large dimension is a very big deal? I don't care, right? Because I am not worried about the dimensionality anymore. All I am interested is that I should be able to compute this. Whatever it is a distance metric or whatever metric I define it, I should be able to do that. And now one more important thing here is this Lagrangians that you see here, right? So this Lagrangians that you have here, most of these Lagrangians are zero. So this is something that you would have seen in your classical also. So most of your alpha i's are zeros, right? What does that mean? That whatever is your non-zero alpha I is a support vector, right? So you will have this. This is something that is there in your classical SPM also, where you have, say, that very minimal number of support vectors that are generated, right? So each data point is now labeled by the sign of this, right? Or maybe we should write that also. So the labels of this is basically the sign of, again the same thing. Um, alpha I yi k of xi s plus. So some bias term I'm keeping. Some is the inner product with the kernel function, right? And this computation is easy. So why I'm trying to say it's easy is the overlap between the new data point and the support vector is going to give us this distance between them, right? So for a new data point, the classification becomes very easy. And because most of them are zeros, right? So you have just some alpha i's that are non-zero. So basically you say that, okay, just between each of this new data point S, which is a new data point, right? I will compare that with, say, each of these alpha i's, zero. And for the rest, I will not even compute anything, right? So very minimal amount of computation I can do and I can get that, right? So that is what we mean by a quantum feature map, right? The rest of the things are all exactly similar. So this is all we do when we say that this is a quantum feature. Okay. Now there is properties like quantum parallelism and quantum interference. Those are things that we can use to load more data, right? So one thing when we so all this math is very beautiful and very nice. Now, when you actually run quantum circuits, then what happens? So when you actually run these as quantum circuits, so what you do is typically for say n data points, you are trying to construct a kernel matrix of n cross n, right? Wherein each entry is basically an inner product of, say, two data points, right? So for that, what will you have to do? So let's say this is for 1, 1, right? And this is for, say, 1, 2, right? So basically, you have a quantum circuit which you are running, right? For the first data point, then you will have a similar exact circuit for the second data point, and so on. So think about this. For each of this entry, you have to run a circuit. So for n data points, you total run n square circuits to generate this kernel matrix. This is your training time, okay, or training complexity, if you may say. So the training complexity is order n square. Clear? Now, this is training. And then if I say at test, I have m data points, right, in my test data. Then again, I have to construct a kernel. Now this kernel is n cross m. N cross m. So I said that given any new data point, what did I say here? Given any new data point, you calculate the distance or you calculate the similarity with that particular alpha is, right? You don't have to do it for all alphas. You just have to do it for that one particular, some particular alphas which are non-zero. So you will just do it for this new data point. So n cross m again. So then this is test is n cross m, right? Now, what it means is you are running n square circuits here plus n into m circuits here. So think of this now. So if your data set size is say 100, so n is equal to 100, then you are actually running, say, 100,000 circuits for training. And if m is, say, even if m is 50, then you have another 5,000 circuits to test, right? So many circuits that you are running within a job cycle, and you want to ensure that for so long your qubits remain the noise doesn't increase drastically. That's a challenge today. So one thing that we did in one of our papers to show that, okay, for QSVM or for these kind of algorithms, data loading is one big challenge. True, but parallel processing is something that we need to do. So can we process all data points together by loading them as superposition of data? Yes, that is one way. Can we actually run these circuits parallelly across different hardware infrastructure? Yes, that is one way. And or we can run them on parallelly across the same device. If you have, say, say, let's say you are working on a problem of classifying whether a person is male or female. In let's say in this class, we are how many are male and female, and what is the features we have, our height and weight, right? So you basically say that, okay, two features. So oh, what happened? You can see my screen. I think my screen is gone. Okay, so if we have, say, let's say two features, then what we say is that, yeah, okay, my screen is back. Yeah, okay. So if we had, say, two features, then you say that, okay, you just have two qubits that you are using in here, but you have for across so many data sets, so many circuits that you are running, right? So you have a very big a quantum device which has, say, 156 qubits, and because you are needing only two qubits for training, so within that same device you can do intra. So basically, I'm saying intra-device parallelization. Okay, so this is what you are doing, that, okay, within a single chipset, I am running multiple, two qubit circuits and in parallel, or you could do inter-device parallelization. So if you have across multiple chips, multiple QPUs that you have, you run. And what we do is, all we are interested is just running this and getting this kernel matrix. Once you have this kernel matrix, then you are solving for these parameters using this classical solvers, right? So then you do not use it, you use a quantum device. The quantum device is only for generating this kernel matrix, right? So you can have a better or more efficient, hardware efficient encoding. For example, if you encode data as rotation angles and so on, and then you can, I mean, it's much more efficient for running in as quantum circuits, and then you run it across whatever modes of parallelization that you want to use, and then you have a classical optimization. So this is the entire flow of quantum kernel SVM. So in the 2019 or 2018 Nature paper that I had mentioned yesterday in my initial slides when I was showing you, which is, I think, supervised classification or supervised learning of quantum enhanced feature spaces. I think that's what is the name of the paper. I think there the way they had proposed is exactly this. So you have your xi, and you apply, say, some phi of xi, and then you apply, say, some phi of xi, xj transpose, right? And this part, so even if they are different, you can club them in and say this part happens in my quantum chip, and once I have the kernel matrix, then I just use some classical optimizer which is running on my CPU, and that gives me my output YS. Right? So this is not just true for SVM. I mean, it is true for, say, variational algorithms also. But typically for kernelized classifiers, what we do is, once we get this kernel, you can here use a classical SVM. In this case, you can use a classical SVM. Okay, and you can run it on CPU, right? And then you can have multiple iterations of it, and do it for, so in this paper, I think they showed it for continuous data, but there is one paper which is like quantum feature maps for discrete data. There are tools for upper bounding quantum advantage, tools for Fourier encoding quantum analysis, and so on, right? So quantum analysis, if you can figure out, then you can actually work this way. So just to summarize, oops, getting too big. So just to summarize, what we are saying here is we had some notion of a similarity metric. We saw how this similarity metric can be used to build a classifier, because we can do it by some probability density approximation. So what we first did is we created some kernelized classifier, and once we had this kernelized classifier, we figured out that, okay, what is a valid kernel? How does a valid kernel have to be? Once we know that, okay, this is how a valid kernel has to be, then if this is mathematically correct for being a valid kernel, then we know, okay, how can we construct the support vectors, and how can we, by getting the sign, we can actually do an appropriate classification of them. Now that once we concluded the math part, we know that, okay, now how can I practically implement it? So for practical implementation, what we are saying is we need to run it as a set of quantum circuits. However, number of features we have, that many number of qubits, let's say, given if we are using them as, say, angle encoding, or some encoding scheme wherein I need as many number of features, as many number of qubits, so that and I need that many number of circuits as my number of data points. So if you have n data points here, there are n circuits that I have. So my training complexity is order of n square, and my test complexity is the training data into the test data. Ideally, many of these points would be zeros. As I said, alpha i's are not all non-zero. Many of them are zero, so there will be a large number of zero, and there will be only few that are non-zero. So that is very fast to compute. That's why the inference time is significantly lower, but still the training time can be huge. And as soon as you start increasing the data set, then the training time becomes low, because that many number of quantum circuits you are wanting to run, right? So that brings us to the end of quantum support vector machine. Now we wanted to look at some advanced QML algorithms, and I will give you some advanced QML algorithms, or intuitions to some advanced QML algorithms. So one algorithm that we cannot do in say a matter of 4 hours is quantum Boltzmann machine. So there are variational quantum Boltzmann machine, and I would leave you guys with pointers and papers and some notes, maybe some of my notes that wherein I show, okay, what is a classical Boltzmann machine, and how can you create a quantum Boltzmann machine. But one algorithm that I will cover today is quantum GANs. This is a generative model, and because there's a lot of generative models that are being spoken about these days. So, and many of you know GANs. So classical GANs can hallucinate from noise. They start to generate from noise. They have two competitions, or say the competitors to mention. There are like two blocks. One is a discriminator and another is a generator. Both are up against each other and trying to beat each other down, and eventually they are trying to learn and become better and better, right? So that's what you do in a classical GAN. Now, the motivation of our Q-GANs did not come up because people wanted to build a quantum brother of classical GANs. The motivation was different here, right? And that's what we'll start from. So, oops, again. So one big problem that we have been discussing is the state preparation, right? So we have been saying that, okay, loading data to quantum states is difficult, and in the worst case, it could be exponential, right? So that is a challenge, right? And that has been the motivation here. And as an end result of solving this challenge, a certain identification of the quantum GANs happened. right? So what was the modification? So what was the challenge here? The challenge is that loading data to quantum states is difficult and exponential in worst case, right? So whatever advantages or quantum advantages that we are envisioning here, right, that would be impaired by this very first step, right? The first step of quantum machine learning algorithm, as we discussed yesterday, is encoding, right? And if in that state itself you have exponential number of gates that you have used, no matter how much advantage the remaining algorithm gives you at the very first step, you are gone. So what is the solution to this problem? And one such solution that was proposed is, can I approximate data loading using a parameterized quantum circuit? Okay, so we learned about parameterized quantum circuits and answers yesterday in a lot of detail. So can I actually approximate a data loading scheme using a parameterized quantum circuit and some classical ML techniques? So the idea here is that if I encode the probability distribution into a parameterized quantum circuit, use say a classical GAN to learn the probability distribution underlying a given data set, then in quantum we need to model the actual distribution of this probability Hamiltonian, right? So can we do that, right? Now in the real world we do not have a functional probability distribution, right? We just have data samples. You will have a lot of data samples. You will have height and weight of each student in the class, right? And you don't have a functional probability distribution. You don't have a defined function that f of this height and this weight is the representation of this entire class. It is very hard to do that, right? So that's the real world scenario. So what is a direct approach? A direct approach could be that, let's say you have a data set. You model the probability distribution, which is, let's say, x is this direction and p of x is this direction, and let's say you have some probability distribution, and then load this probability distribution to a quantum computer, right? Now this is not efficient as this needs this exponential number of gates, right? So this impairs any potential advantage and adds a lot of circuit overhead as we discussed earlier. So this is like a direct approach. Versus, let's say, approach 2, which is using QGANs, right? So basically what we are saying is you have your data, you take it to quantum, right? So we approximate a probability distribution, and then we use a classical GANs. So that is step 1. Step 2 is use classical GANs. So what do we do in classical GAN training? So we have a discriminator and a generator. So classical GAN, many of you know, so you have a loss function, again LD, let's say phi, then based on the number of data points, m is equal to 1 to capital M. You will have two terms basically here. So one is a log of d phi x, each x. So this is your actual data, right? And then again within here you have another one which is log of 1 minus d phi of So this, let's say this is your generated data, right? So the difference between these two, and that is what your GAN is trying to minimize, right? So on one side you have your discriminator. To train the discriminator, you take a batch of M samples. That's why I said M is equal to 1 to M. Let's say the discriminator is takes a batch of M samples, right? Plugs it into the discriminator and it tries to discriminate. And in generator, what you say, you generate some small m samples, plug it into the discriminator and make the discriminator classify them, right? Now, generator in this case is classical and it's not stochastic, so you need a random input or a prior distribution to generate a different output, right? For the discriminator, it just has to say real or fake, right? It just has to say real or false. So you can plug it into the loss function and that's it, right? So now what you're targeting to do is you're trying to maximize the probability distribution, or saying that the training data is real and these generated samples are fake, right? And while you are doing that, the generator wants just the opposite, right? The generator wants to say that no, my generated samples, okay, this, what is the problem with my generated samples? Now let me make it better and let me make it as close as your actual data. So the generator wants opposite of that, right? So in the quantum realm, what happens is your generator is a PQC, right? And then your training data is classical, everything else is classical, right? So how this new generated sample is classical, that's also something to explain. But I mean, the training data here is classical and that goes into the discriminator. So you will have to ensure that everything is classical. So the training data, I mean, the training data, I should write, training data is classical and this goes to the generator. So even if you have, so in the quantum realm, the only change that you will do is you have your generator. So replace generator with a parameterized quantum circuit, which is say g theta of your initial state to g theta, right? So basically, if the generated data is quantum, right? So then you have here quantum and here classical. That cannot happen. So then you have to, so let's say if generated data is quantum, so then you have to first measure it. So once you measure, it is now generated, the sample is classical, and then you put it back into the discriminator, right? So because discriminator has one side classical, the other side has to be classical, then only, you can go back and make the discriminator figure out the difference between the two. Right? So that is in principle how you create a quantum GAN, right? So basic, sorry, no, so that is in principle how you create a quantum GANs. So as we said, right, the point that we started was that okay, we are not able to load the entire data to quantum states by means of these encoding algorithms that we currently have. So can I encode the the probability distributions into a parameterized quantum circuit? Then use a GAN to learn these probability distributions, and so the discriminator can still stay classical and the generator can be quantum. So in a QGAN, the minimum thing that you have is a classical discriminator and a swap generator with QGAN. Okay, so this is one way, and there are a lot of these algorithms. So even very recently, there are some algorithms that are being developed in this space, where people are looking at these kind of algorithms. But I'll just give you guys very basic intuition to some of the other um advanced QML algorithm. For example, you guys know about Boltzmann machine. So there is a variational quantum Boltzmann machine. I do not have the time. I mean, the variational quantum Boltzmann machine is a very big one, right? And but I just want you guys to have the intuition so that if you want to study, so if you want to study the math of it, you can take that up at any point in time. So what you have is, there is it's more structured knowledge about the data. Quantum Boltzmann machine can help in. So you can define the problem in terms of an energy function or an Hamiltonian. So classical Boltzmann machine or their energy-based machine learning model. So you have two layers of, many of you might know it. So let's say classical Boltzmann machine is very simple. You have some visible nodes, and then you have some hidden nodes. These are your hidden nodes. These act as your latent variables, and these act as your input variable. Let's just call them input variable or input variable. And the energy function defines the connectivity between these, right? So these can be related to binary variables or spin variables for quantum theory understanding. And from a concept in thermodynamics, we can write this energy function in a summation of the theta ij sij and theta I of si for each of these nodes si. And let's say the parameters are these thetas, right? So you have these Boltzmann distribution, and you have certain partition functions and some normalizing factors in that partition function, which is sum over of all possible energy configurations, right? So that's how you typically define this classical Boltzmann machine. But in a quantum Boltzmann machine, basically what you do is you just have a few, you have this preparation of Gibbs state, and you prepare this Gibbs state in order to reach there, right? So how can you approximate a Gibbs state with a parameterized quantum circuit? Basically, you train these parameters of this Hamiltonian in a way that the sampling probability represents the probability distribution, right? So once you have that kind of a probability distribution, so then you can train them, right? Train the particular device or circuit, and then you now can transfer the loss function definition. So you have multiple options. So you can have a classical loss function, or else you can also have a quantum loss function. So classical loss function, what do? You measure the Q state, right? And in a quantum loss function, you map the classical probability to rank one quantum state and do that, right? So, I mean, you can think of this as something very similar. Instead of an explicit energy function, you now define a Hamiltonian. So in QBM, just minor changes. So for example, one such changes is, instead of your explicit energy function that you had here, right? Your energy function defines the connectivity, right? These connectivities. So instead of that, you now have a Hamiltonian. You have a Hamiltonian. So Hamiltonian is basically a problem mapper. It is directly related to the connectivity of the network now. And so this is directly related to connectivity. And the second thing is preparation of Gibbs state, right? So you have to propose it, or you have to project it on a Gibbs state. So the second important point is project So basically what we do here is, in order to project it to a Gibbs state, we have something called quantum imaginary. I'll just put it. I think this is a lot more complicated in terms of the math of it. So quantum imaginary time evolution. So there is a variational form of that which is called var-Quiet. Right, so you use var-Quiet. So quiet is defined with respect to a single or an n-qubit Hamiltonian. So an n-qubit Hamiltonian is weighed over the sample or the Pauli operators, right? And you have a variational form of that as well. So that is what is used to predict it to a Gibbs state. And again, after that, you have like approximate state evolution. Then you do your SED components, and finally you have the quantum Boltzmann machine training. So I'm not doing the entire math here, so but I'll still try to give you guys an understanding and just write the loss function for you. So you have, for the visible node, say the probability of the data, right, for the visible nodes, and then you have your log probability of this, say, QBM on the visible nodes, right? Now this part could be, I should write it. So this part could be a classical loss function, right? And you can also write it as P data V log of trace right? So what you're saying is, by measuring this Gibbs state, we can get the classical probability. So this is your, by measuring this Gibbs state, we can get the classical probabilities. Right, so this gradient of loss function computation is not really easy. The derivation has to have, it leads to two terms, right? The one term, the right term, is easier and efficiently computable, versus the left hand side part of the term that you see here. It is difficult to compute, right? So if certain computation relates unknown or is not sufficed, then you will not be able to train with the actual gradients of the loss function. Rather, you have to use an upper bound, right? So there exists an upper bound by Golden-Thomson. So now, by using var-Quiet, we can say that, okay, our circuit parameters and their evolution depends on the Hamiltonian parameters, right? So this in turn enables you to evaluate those gradients with automatic differentiation using chain rule, right? So that's basically how you would learn this final loss function, or the gradient with respect to the Gibbs state. It could be first order gradient of an expectation value with respect to the quantum states, or even higher order. Now as you say higher order, then it becomes even more difficult, right? So the gradient of the system of linear equations, it needs even more higher order gradients. So again, you have to use explicit Euler, and there's a lot of math into it. I'm not going into all the detailed math. So without writing all the detailed math, it is hard to explain how you propagate the gradient of the circuit parameters with respect to Hamiltonian parameters. But all of that steps you do to be able to actually do the QBM training. So that's what we were, you have to do. So this is, even if, so you put all these three things together, then you have a implementation or a training process. And maybe just if you, just quickly complete it, that the implementation or the training procedure here is, you first initialize a Hamiltonian. You initialize a Hamiltonian HQ with a set of parameters for the Hamiltonian. You use var-Quiet to prepare the Gibbs state. right? You do all the necessary terms, automatic differentiation and so on. Then you plug in the terms you have found, you compute gradients. Compute gradients of Gibbs state, right? You sample this Gibbs state. This is what we didn't clearly write. You basically apply chain rule, so you can do the math. If you apply chain rule, you try to get the derivatives here, and then you compute the resulting loss functions derivative, right? So once you compute that, the next step is again a classical step that we have always been doing. So you update theta with the classical optimizer. So you keep doing these 4 steps till you have a termination criteria. So termination criteria could be any, say, training convergence criteria. Okay, I was not audible, maybe, so I don't know. So, which part was not very clear, but yeah, this is a hard one that I tried to cover for you guys, but yeah, if you're interested, you can go through the details here. I have tried to summarize the algorithm for you. So now, as the last step, you update theta with the classical optimizer. So you'll see that whatever we are doing here is at a high level, at a 10,000 feet level, maybe you'd see a similarity between this and say variational quantum algorithms. You had again 4 steps there, but yeah, internally the 4 steps would look slightly different. But again, the 4th step is all classical optimization of these parameters, theta parameters, and then you continue to repeat this, repeat, steps 1 to 4 till some training convergence you call it, or some termination criteria, early training, and whatever you call, right? So that is how you have an automatic differentiation for quantum Boltzmann training, which comes from the Werk-White of Gibbs state preparation. So this state preparation learning is actually compatible with the near-term quantum computer. So that's why this particular algorithm again is a near-term quantum algorithm. There are no such so we discussed 4 algorithms. We discussed variational quantum algorithms, which primarily we focused on variational quantum classifier. We did the entire math for that. Then we went on to kernel theory and looked at QSVM. We briefly went through QGANs and quantum Boltzmann machines. And all these 4 algorithms that you see, they are all, you can all run these things in the near-term quantum devices, right? So they are like, they have a constant depth, constant architecture quantum circuit. So you can just, use them and run them for today's kind of applications. So that at a broad level is say 2 very well-known algorithms and 2 advanced QML algorithms we have discussed. And there I'll just say a couple of links and research papers, but there's this. So all the material, at least the first 2 parts of the material that I taught, we have encoded it nicely and added some as yesterday some of the participants were saying, some notebooks. So we have proper notebooks that we have, and I'll just drop that link. It's very small, it's just a 5-hour thing. But it doesn't have the higher order algorithms, of course, because these higher order these advanced QML algorithms take significantly larger time per algorithm. So just the first 2 algorithms, the variational quantum classifier and the QSVM, for that you have and there is a bunch of, I think, 3 or 4 lectures, and I will point you there, which has the detailed notebooks and all of that. So, I mean, interested people can look into it. And I mean, the entire notes, which, so in class, I'm doing like handwritten notes, but there's like properly typed notes that you will also get in. So I'll share all of that, the links of research papers as well as the Jupyter notebooks there. So I hope that would be useful for people who are interested in quantum machine. So, okay, I will stop sharing screen. Any questions? Let me see if there are questions. Okay. No questions here. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, participants, if you have any questions, we'll quickly take one or two questions. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful, extensive coverage of lot of concepts. And then, yeah, they'll be looking forward for the notebooks. If one or two codes they will be able to run on their own,
Yes.
they'll be able to see through and understand what exactly is happening, and they'll appreciate that. And the notes that you have shared yesterday, I think, for the yesterday's lecture, similarly today also, if you can share, that will be great.
Yes, yes. So that one also I'll share. I am sharing a couple of these things. So this is the learning platform. Out of that learning platform, this is the quantum machine learning course which I mentioned. So this is something that we did, I think, 2 years ago. All of the content that we have for just the first two algorithms, that's there here with the notebooks and everything. And today's thing also I'll just convert it into PDF and send it to you, Professor Billy, and you can send it to the participants.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, please note these links. We will also share them in the WhatsApp group, so you can take it from there as well. And then a lot of content is there. You can try to take it forward and practice, and do hands-on, and then you can pick up. And then you can actually try to see similar things, and many case studies were presented today. Please look at the related papers that were mentioned on the slides. You can go through those papers, and that will be for the people who are looking at taking some research aspect into quantum machine learning.
Yeah.
For those who want to use it for teaching, you could run these sample codes, and then you could take it forward to explain to your students, so that they can run similar codes and then see that. We also introduce them to some little bit of penny lane also, ma'am, so they can run the codes there as well. And,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
so if you have no questions, then we can conclude today. It's been a great time. I think whatever you were expecting has been delivered, so you don't have much questions today. So you have.
No, I know that the last two advanced QML algorithms are hard. They are hard to grasp in such a short time. So I'll give some, a benefit of doubt there, because I know I myself teach them, across multiple classes, right? So please take some time, go through the notes, go through the algorithms, and then if you have questions, just feel free to let me know at any portal. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it will take some time. Yesterday also I was concluding and mentioning the same thing. Don't get, it will be like a lot of things, or maybe difficult things like that. But where do you need quantum is what we have been thinking all along, is where the classical things don't help us. So that's where we need to look at taking forward, and then looking at how do we use the power that will be available for us, and try to build that strength that we can. So please, you need to look at some of the case studies that were presented, some papers that are already there. So you can, and then you'll obviously have to do hands-on. Some codes will be available. Some things ma'am will also share. And of course, there are a lot of content in Qiskit tutorials also that ma'am has shared on the IBM Cloud. A lot of content is there. You can look at that. So hopefully we'll take it forward. And thank you so much, ma'am, once again for sparing your valuable time. And it's been though it was a snapshot of a lot of content, but then, yeah, your valuable time is more important for us, that you could spare 4 hours, and really wonderful sessions both days.